Hi, this is Claudia Pringles. Thank you for coming to this webinar. I'm just trying to situate the computer in front of me. So today I'll be talking about Act 158. I refer to it as the Autism Treatment Law, but it's really for other children, not just kids with autism. So first I'd like to thank Vermont Family Network for inviting me to do this presentation, and I hope our listeners find it helpful. It will be recorded, and you'll be able to listen to it later or view it on YouTube. Okay, let me get a little situated. So as far as questions, please feel free to ask questions. If they're clarifying questions, I'll try to remember to look at the screen as I go through this, but if they're clarifying questions, jargon busters, I'll answer them as soon as I see them. Other questions I'll more likely answer at the end. Appreciate if the questions are very brief. And always feel free to give me a call if you have just some quick questions, and I'll give you my contact information at the very end. And the questions that you do give me, I won't mention who you are or anything, so it's all anonymous. There's the... Okay, so just about me, I'm a Vermont licensed attorney. I've had a practice dedicated to special needs law since 2008. Most of my work is in special needs planning, special needs trusts, wills, all the other typical estate planning documents. I also assist with special education, and another category I call disability consultation. It's really a catch-all for different areas, guardianship, Act 158, Act 264 meetings, things like that. So advocacy, I'm very involved in. I'm very involved in advocacy. It's my passion. It's what I love doing. Currently, I'm down to one committee, and I'm happy being on just one committee. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Vermont Autism Task Force. But over the years, I've been on many different committees and initiatives, and it's been something I've really enjoyed. And my most important role, of course, is I'm a mother of two, and I have a 15-year-old daughter with autism named Katerina. So today we will be talking about, so here's our agenda. We'll be talking about what Act 158 is. I'll give you a couple of updates. We'll talk a little bit about how to get started, the basics, and then I'll also talk about where you can get more help and how you can get more involved with the advocacy. So the next slide is the actual signing of Act 158, and that's, of course, Governor Shumlin. My daughter is sitting next to him in a red shirt, and that's me standing behind her. But we owe all of this to the gentleman on the other side of Governor Shumlin. That's Ron Marcellus and his son Connor. And Ron, I want to say about 2007, 2008, joined the Vermont Autism Task Force, and he said to me, you know, it would be great if insurance would pay for treatment for my son. And I would have loved to help him at the time, but I was busy working on another advocacy issue with the use of about the use of restraints in the schools. So I said, well, good luck. I'll help you when I can. And a couple years later, I was able to help him, but I'm always grateful that he took initiative with this. Behind Ron is, of course, Senator Anthony Polina, who was our sponsor for Act 158 and a very strong advocate for people with disabilities, among others. The lady on the left, blonde, is Judith Urcidi from Autism Speaks. They're incredibly helpful with technical expertise in helping with this law, and Judith flies all over the country helping other advocates in different states get their laws passed. A few of the kids, we have young Graham on the left. I can't tell who the kids are up front. I think that might be Ian, Josh, and then my younger daughter, Jenna Lily. And the parents that are listening in could probably tell that Jenna Lily is Kat's sibling because of the way she's touching her sister, which often you see in pictures if you've noticed how siblings of kids with special needs are. So in summary, the first law was passed, Act 127, I want to say 2010, and that law only went from age 18 months to 6 years, and that was a real heartbreak for the parents who worked on that. Our kids are older, and but it was a start, and a couple years later, the following year after that, there was an attempt to repeal the earlier law. We fought that off, thankfully, and the year after that, 2012, we were successful in getting Act 158, which is an expansion of Act 127. So now the law covers people with autism and early childhood developmental disabilities. That was added, and from birth to age 21. Which click is that? Thank you. So Act 158 covers treatment at home and in the community, so it is not at all related to services at school. It only covers evidence-based treatment, so that means it doesn't cover anything that's experimental. It applies to private insurers such as, and I won't read the rest of the presentation just so you know. Applies to private insurers, Cigna, MVP, Blue Cross, and to state public programs, including Medicaid. And Vermont is the only state of the, I believe, 38 states now that have similar laws in place. We're the only state that has included Medicaid. And our law does not apply to self-insured plans, and that's not because it was an oversight. It's because the state doesn't have any authority to make laws about self-insured plans, because that is covered under federal ERISA. And self-insured plans are usually by really large companies that will self-finance their own insurance plan for their employees. So if you work for a larger company, there's a very good chance, like IBM, there's a very good chance that that company will be self-insured. Having said that, some of the self-insured companies do voluntarily offer coverage for employees. So one of my good friends is Lou Melgarejo from Indiana, and he's an employee of Comcast, and for years he tried to get coverage for his own daughter. Comcast, of course, is a self-insured plan. And he finally succeeded. So not only does his daughter now have coverage for ABA in particular, but it also applies to all the other Comcast employees. So it can be done. So the Vermont State Employees actually is a self-insured plan, but they did voluntarily decide to follow the law. So if you are a Vermont State employee, and I just got a question popped in to that. And just got a little bit distracted. So actually Cigna is not the insurer for Vermont State employees. It's now Blue Cross Blue Shield. We have Blue Cross Blue Shield state employees, and my daughter's been receiving therapy now, ABA, for the last year and a half. And now further on down the slides, I will try to get in and explain a little bit about my daughter's, the whole process we went through. Thank you. So another important element about our law is that there are no annual dollar caps. So in some different states, we've seen where at a certain age, there's only an obligation to pay X amount of dollars, and after that, you're done. But we don't have that in Vermont, thank goodness, because that really isn't fair. So again, Act 158 covers evidence-based treatments, which of course means not experimental treatment. So it's some of the treatments you might be interested in getting covered just wouldn't be covered under this. It doesn't mean it wouldn't be paid for, it just means it doesn't have to be paid for. So some of the typical therapies we're talking about, and most of what I'll be talking about today will apply to individuals with autism, because that's really the focus of getting the law passed. But we've seen since it's been able to expand to other kids, which has been great. So some of the typical treatments, of course, we're talking about is ABA, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, etc. So a lot of my focus today will be on ABA. And the reason being is that is a brand new therapy that is now covered. That was a huge goal for us to get this law passed, is to get ABA coverage. So what is ABA? It's behavioral treatment that can help individuals with mild needs to severe needs reach their full potential, prepare them for adulthood. So the treatment, for treatment and skill development, it can focus on communication, social skills, adaptive learning skills, such as gross and fine motor, toileting, dressing, eating, personal care, domestic skills, and work skills. So it's really about the individual needs of a child. And I will say I've heard many parents say that ABA is not for their child because their child is high functioning. And that is absolutely not the case at all. If your child is in need of any help, I would strongly consider, suggest considering ABA or other therapies. And my approach is to, look at your child and say, what is it that my child might need that could help him or her in the future get a job? What are the obstacles that are there? And see how you can get that worked out. So with ABA, there's a plan that's put in place on how to achieve certain goals. It depends on what the needs are for the individual child, and it's a written plan. And I have, for my own daughter, I'll talk a little bit about my daughter because she's in an ABA program at home and at school right now. So she does have a behavior plan in place, one at home and one at for school, and it's probably about 25 pages long, and it talks about all the different goals and how we want to achieve certain goals, the behaviors we want to increase. For her, we'd like her to be more independent, to be more social, to learn how to interact, to transition better. And then there are also behaviors that we want to decrease. We don't want her to get upset and hit someone when she gets angry. We don't want her to have a meltdown, or we don't want her to bolt, different things like that. So it really depends on the needs of the child, but it's all written. And the way ABA works, I'm no expert on ABA, but it breaks down the tasks into steps. And the important part about being written is that it can be used consistently across people who work with my daughter so that she gets a consistency. And it's very heavily data-driven, so these are people who love graphs. But it's important because I like to see where my daughter's progressing, where she's not, where her behavior's at. So ABA is also an intensive therapy, and what I mean by that is that unlike, for example, maybe speech therapy that you might have a couple hours a week, ABA could be 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week. It depends, again, on the needs of the child. My daughter does have 20 hours of ABA at home for the week, but during that time, of course, she does take little breaks. It's not intensive to where she's under a lot of stress or pressure during that time, but it's working out very well for her. And it is a team approach, so it's the people involved is the person who supervises is called a BCBA, Board Certified Behavior Analyst. This is someone with a master's degree who has passed certain exams and is certified nationally. And this person writes up the plan. They're the ones I usually discuss concerns about with my daughter and what we want to work on. And then we have the frontline people. Those are the behavior interventionists. And there might be a group, could be 2, 3. And I meant to go back and fix this slide, and I put others, and I couldn't remember, but sometimes you might have some other people in between that work between the BCBA and the BI. So, it could be a team of about 4 or 5 people. They're not all working with my daughter at once. Sometimes I've got about 4 cars at my house, but most of the time it's just one person working directly with my daughter. So Act 158 includes ABA, and as I mentioned, this was a huge win for us because the options before the law were you'd have to pretty much pay out of pocket. So you know, if you've got an extra 100,000 laying around, I guess it's okay, but if not, it's good to have insurance cover that. So why is this law so important? So prior to passing the law, the insurance companies would simply deny. They would say, nope, we're not going to pay for that treatment. We don't want to. We don't have to. We're not sure if it's evidence-based. We think it's questionable. And they just would not pay for it. And that meant that only the families who could afford to pay for it out of pocket would have access to it. And then for other therapies, such as speech therapy and physical therapy and occupational therapy, for example, the insurance companies might have said, we'll cover that, but you only get 12 visits per year. And they'll put arbitrary limitations, which is not allowed now under our law. You can't put arbitrary limitations on the amount of therapy a person gets. It's really up to the person's medical need and what their needs are, and I'll talk a little bit more later about how we determine that. So really the focus on this law is about treating the underlying condition of autism or the disability. And rather than what is done at school, which I think I have in a different slide anyway, so I'll talk about this school. So this is really about the long-term goal and helping the child across different environments, just to do a little bit better with that. And it's really also about having a better quality of life for the individual and for their family. A few months ago, I was with a group of advocates who went to go meet with one of the agencies at the state. And when I talked to the parents about their struggles with their child, they had all pretty much said the same thing. We just want our kid to do fine when he's an adult. And my question, well, why doesn't your life today matter? What about your life as a family today? What about your other kids? You know, if there's certain challenges, why would you want to wait? Why not enjoy a better quality of life today? And also the law is important, I believe, because it recognizes the medical needs of people with autism. And one of the struggles we dealt with was that other kids with different medical conditions were getting access to treatment that our kids weren't, and it just really seemed unfair. So before the law was passed, particularly for ABA and really for all the different therapies as well, is that the parents had just a couple of options. They would pay for treatment out of pocket if they had the funds to do that, or they'd fight the school to get services because that was the only option to get it, or they would just go without. So this law has really helped level the playing field. So what's the difference with Act 158 and PCA respite hours? Well, there is actually no impact on that whatsoever. That's completely separate. So some of the concerns I've heard are that a personal care budget would be impacted, or respite budget, or you'd have to pay out of pocket. If you have a flexible budget that you can pay for, you should not be tapping into any of your budget if you have a budget, if you have a C3 plan, for example. This is really about medical needs. So just like you would not tap into a budget to pay for your child's visit to the dentist or the doctor, you shouldn't have to do that to pay for needed therapy. The bigger question really comes about what is the best use of your child's time. So often I've heard that after school, kids come home and they might have a PCA for a few hours that'll supervise them and work with the kids a little bit, but these folks really aren't trained. So yeah, they don't get paid a whole lot, and often they're very good people. Sometimes I've heard families say they've had the same PCA for 5, 6, 7 years, or like a member of a family. I heard another mom say that she'd hate for that the family that works with her child really depends on the PCA income, and she'd hate to take that away. And at the end of the day, as a parent, you have to really decide what's the best use of your child's time, whether it's to get some additional therapy that could really help them today and in the future, or just to be watched and supervised and make sure they're safe. So that's really a decision for parents to make. You absolutely don't lose your PCA hours, so we've cut back on use of our PCA during the week because there's just not enough hours in a day. But they're still available for us to use if we need to on the weekend or during the school breaks. So it's still there. You don't lose that. The other question is about Act 158 versus, or in comparison to school services. Well, this has absolutely nothing to do with school. So schools do not pay for any therapy received under Act 158, as this only applies to home and community. And if you do get therapy at home, or if your child gets therapy at home or the community, it does not have any impact on what's going on at school. So the schools can't say, well, you're getting ABA for your child at home, we don't have to provide it at school. No, that we access those for two very different reasons. And the same thing, if you're trying to get insurance to pay for therapy, they can't say, well, you're getting it at school, so now we don't have to pay for it here. But overall, Act 158 is very good news for schools because prior to this law, parents' only option was to fight the school for services because they couldn't get it elsewhere unless they had all that money to pay for it out of pocket. So it's very good news for schools. But it's even better news for parents is that now we have more options available of how we can get therapy for our kids. So sometimes I've heard parents say that, well, their child is already getting therapy at school, so why bother with more therapy? And this is really, what's important to think about is the differences of getting services at school versus at home. And with that, let me explain to you a little bit about my daughter's program. My daughter's had ABA in one form or another since, well, she actually had it in California for about a year and a half, from age 3 to 4.5. We moved to Vermont, and then she started, I think, at age 6 again, and has had it pretty much since. But the purpose for the ABA or behavior therapy at school is really to help her access the school environment. My daughter has trouble with transitions, going, or did, not so much anymore, going from class to class. It was to help her stay calm, keep her safe, keep other kids safe, go to the lunch space and be fine with people close to her. For many years she couldn't go to recess because it was just very difficult for her. Not just dealing with problem behaviors, but really to get her to be in a position to where she can learn as much as possible during the school day. So it really wasn't about treating the underlying condition of autism. It's about helping her get to school and get as much out of it. And today we have her ABA therapist in the morning will come to our house about half hour before school starts and help my daughter get going and get to school as close to being on time as possible. Before we had this help, it was, I always joke, it was an alcohol-inducing event for us to get my daughter off to school on time. It was extremely stressful for the whole family. And now she goes to school. They help her with that. She transitions well. But the home piece is really about autism itself and about carrying it over, the benefits of the treatment over across environments. So since we've started the home treatment, we've seen just a lot of different improvements. I think at the end I have more slides to talk about that. So another big difference with this law is that it's 52 weeks a year, has nothing to do with the school year. And this is really important when you have a child with autism because a change in the schedule can be very difficult. So we still have our therapists come when there isn't any school, and we work out the schedule in advance of how often we'd like them to be there. We'll switch their hours around. We might say, come 3 days a week, the other 2 days, well, you won't come. And for Act 158, there's no IEP team involvement, so you don't have to get the whole IEP team to agree to it or decide on the goals. It's really about what you as a parent want to work on. And again, I mentioned this earlier, it's important to make the most of your child's day, week, childhood and school day. What does your child do after school, comes home, maybe spends some time, maybe watches TV, plays in a game? So for us, it was important as a family to give our daughter the best chance that she has, not just for today, but as an adult, to be independent. And it did mean that she'd have to put in a few therapy hours in the afternoon. Sometimes they're with her till 7 o'clock. But it's been very, very helpful, and my daughter is really happy and progressing and being much more independent than she ever has been. So an important tip for you is to be very careful. I mentioned earlier that the schools can't deny therapy because you're receiving it through insurance or through Medicaid. And insurance can't deny the therapy because you're receiving it at school, and the same for Medicaid. But I would be very careful about sharing information with anyone else. So for example, you probably don't want to mention to the school if you're trying to pursue therapies outside, only because you might be put in a position to where you're under a lot of pressure to change. And if you're a really good, strong advocate, or a lawyer like me, you'd probably be okay, but otherwise, save yourself some of the heartache and don't mention anything. And definitely do not mention anything to insurance companies, because even though, as I mentioned, they're not supposed to do that, they will ask. They will say, is your child getting services through the school? It's none of their business, and it's really important if you do have some therapies to remind any therapists that do speak to the insurance companies that this is all confidential. They are not to share any information about what goes on at school. Be careful if you might have signed a waiver of some sort allowing a sharing of information. It might have been done with the school. You might have done it with a designated agency. We definitely don't want the designated agencies also to communicate with the schools for the same reason. There's a tendency to not want to pay for something and trying to get out of paying. I don't know where my mute button is, so I could cough. And just a quick example about, I don't know, it might have been about 5-6 years ago. I was with a client at an IEP meeting, and the meeting went very well. We got what the mother had wanted. And it was a light moment at the end. We're packing our bags, and everyone's laughing about something, and the school slipped something over to Mom and asked her to sign something, and the mom was still laughing at whatever we were laughing about, went to sign, and I said, well, can I take a look at that? And I looked at it, and the school had wanted her to sign a waiver allowing the school to communicate with the daughter's therapist. And in a perfect world, a sharing of information would be good, but it could be used against you, so be very careful. So we did reach a compromise because we did see the value of sharing some information, but we wanted the mom to be in control of what was being shared, and we didn't really want other parties having pure communication back and forth. So some updates. On the private insurance side, about a year ago, we were, or March of last year, something like that, we were at the State House, and we, the legislators wanted updates on what was happening with the insurance, and we had the private insurance representatives speak, and they were talking about how many kids were accessing therapy. And I think last year they said it was about 30 kids, not a whole lot. I'm sure there's more now. And it was interesting, some of the testimony of why they were denying some of the kids. But some of the really good news is that we've heard some of the kids with Down syndrome are now being approved for ABA, which is great. And I understand it could be very beneficial for kids with Down syndrome as well. So parents still need to do research to ensure they're getting correct information. Might have a slide on this later, but if not, I can let you know a couple of the obstacles insurance companies will throw at you because they don't want to pay for this, or because they just don't know. I'd like to think that people are honest, but they can make it a little bit difficult for parents to get access to this therapy. So they might tell the parents that they won't cover ABA because there's a licensure requirement. There is no licensure requirement that was put into the law itself. And there is no licensure in Vermont for BCBAs. There is for speech therapists, occupational therapists, etc., but there was specific language in the law that for ABA does not have to be implemented by a licensed BCBA because that does not exist in Vermont at this time. Now that applies to private insurance. We did put an exception in the law for Medicaid, reminding that the state does have to follow Medicaid. Medicaid is federal, and federal, if there's a conflict, federal law always trumps state law. So that was put in there. And also to let private insurance know that they would still have to provide this even if there are no licensed BCBAs. That was one of the obstacles. Another big obstacle was about providers. We were told there are no providers, therefore you'd have to pay out of network. And by law, they have to have a list of providers. And I said, no, I will not pay out of network fees. So you will pay in network for the provider that I pick because you don't have any providers. And just because they don't negotiate contracts with providers doesn't put them off the hook. Our own process took about 4 months to get approved from start to finish. And part of it was really just the process does take a while, but a lot of it had to do with just obstacles that the insurance company was throwing at me. And this was about 2 years ago when we got this moving for our daughter. So on the Medicaid side, parents absolutely need to do research to ensure correct information as well. And a few different places where you might be getting information about ABA and Medicaid, but just to remember, these are some of the pieces I've heard parents told. They might be told that there are strict limits to how many hours a week for sessions, and that is not allowed. It has to come from what a doctor says is needed, and that might come from an evaluation by that professional. So do not accept that your child maximum can have 15 hours a week. I read some guidance a few months, maybe it was last year, and I know it was a draft, and I hope it's not in place, but it did indicate that, and it's been a while in my memories, I have a memory of a goldfish, so bear with me, but stated something for Medicaid that kids over a certain age can only get, I don't know, it was 10 or 15 hours a week of ABA, and that's nowhere in the law, so don't be told that. I would definitely recommend that you ask the licensed professional or the BCBA who's making the recommendations to give you a report in writing, because I would be very concerned if someone is jeopardizing their license or their ethical standards they're supposed to follow by making a recommendation knowing that it isn't what they're supposed to be doing. So make sure you do that. I don't want to cause issues. I just want people to be aware of this. And I've heard others, other parents were told that they could not get the ABA or speech therapy or whatever because the therapies are being provided at school. And again, that has nothing to do with anything. Better not to go there and not even mention anything about school, but the home piece has to do with medical need. The school piece has to do with access to education. There was another piece, let me look through my notes, I'm behind a few pages. There was another big piece that people were being, another one with Medicaid. Some rumors going around that there are just not enough providers, so you just need to wait. And that is absolutely not true. So we have two groups of providers for ABA specifically. So we have some ABA that comes through the designated agencies, and then we have our private providers. There definitely is a limit of how many ABA providers there are under the designated agencies. But on the private provider side, we actually have more on the private provider side than we do with the designated agency providers combined. So there are professionals who are willing and able to provide ABA services for families. So, and also when I hear just the logic behind being told there are not enough providers, so you should wait, that's basic economics. That was my undergraduate degree from my dusty recollection, but anyone that takes economics knows that demand drives supply, not the other way around. So if parents are really trying to get more therapy, the therapists will come. And I believe it was in South Carolina that passed a law maybe 10 years ago, their version of Act 158, and the number of ABA therapists that were available in the state tripled after their law passed because the demand was so great for it. So don't ever wait until the day that there are a lot of therapists. And actually, the more you wait, it'll be more difficult because the more parents find out about this, you'll be on some sort of waiting list at some point. So I mentioned designated agencies, and I'm sure most of you know what the designated agencies are, but so they're nonprofit organizations that contract with the state, and they're organized roughly by county. So in Chittenden County, you have Howard Center. In Washington County, we have Washington County Mental Health. So you all know what designated agencies are. Now, the issue with Medicaid and ABA is that the funding for ABA is given directly to the designated agency. So the treatment for ABA is different than for other medical therapies. So, for example, I hurt my knee about 6-7 years ago. I didn't go to the designated agency, for example, to get therapy for that. Or my daughter, who would be a better example. Or if my daughter needs speech therapy and she were on Medicaid, we wouldn't go to the designated agency for that. We would call the Medicaid office, get a list of providers, find out who could take Medicaid, and go from there. We don't have to go to the designated agencies. It's very different for ABA, and there's a reason for it. But it does create some problems. Oh, so the reason for it, I think I have it on my next slide. Okay. I'll talk about the reason, I think, on the next slide. So the problem with the funding going directly to the designated agencies is that not all the designated agencies have autism expertise. So, for example, in Washington County, where I live, there is definite autism expertise. I think they were the very first designated agency in the state to have autism expertise. And they provide that at school and in different environments, but they're not quite set up to provide the home and community under Act 158 at this time. Howard Center has autism expertise. They do provide it in the schools, and they are set up to provide services at home and in the community. But from what I understand, there's quite a long waiting list at this time for parents to get service through them. And a couple other agencies do have that autism expertise, but I'd say the majority of them have no autism expertise. They've never provided it. They don't know anything about ABA, and they're just now trying to figure out what to do and trying to get themselves up to speed. But how long do you wait, I guess, is the question. The other issue really is that there should be a choice of provider. So you don't have to just go with, even if you do live in a county where your agency does have ABA expertise, you're supposed to have a choice of provider. That's under Medicaid law. So even if you still prefer a private provider, you should still be able to go with your private provider and not have to go with that one. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the ABA provided. I've had Washington County work with my daughter, and they do excellent work. But all the organizations are different, and the ABA is a little bit different, and it's just good to go with who you want and have a good fit, just like you pick your mechanic, your lawyer, your doctor, same thing. So the issue is also at this time is that private providers, even though we have a network of private providers who are available to provide ABA, they cannot at this time become Medicaid providers, which means they cannot get paid by Medicaid at this time. And that is because the states have a written agreement with the feds on how Medicaid is used. And currently the agreement only allows for the ABA to be paid directly to the designated agency. So that's why the money goes to the designated agencies. And I can't remember the amount of money. So there has been an allotment of money, I want to say 3.2 million or 3.7, I can't remember, that has been distributed or is available to the designated agencies specifically for ABA for autism. That has already been issued, allowed there. But again, the problem could be that the agency doesn't have the expertise to do it. So it's a little bit tricky, but I think folks are trying to do what they can. So what's the big issue is that our state interpreted the Federal Office of Medicaid, they interpreted the law to mean that unless there's a licensed ABA that they cannot use Medicaid dollars to pay. So with the exception of giving the money directly to the designated agencies, because that's the current agreement. So that brought up the issue of licensure. So even though our law does not require licensure and the private insurance would still need to provide this even though there is no licensure, our state feels that unless we have it, they just can't pay the private providers directly. So that's where we're at with that, but we are progressing with that, and I have some good news on that. So what are the remedies? A few months ago, I think I started mentioning this, is that I got together with a group of parent advocates who are all in varying degrees of very difficult situations with their kids with autism. And I think there were a group of about 5 or 6 of us, and I said, let's go meet with the state and talk about your situation, see how we can problem solve, because it's really not fair that these families are still waiting years after the law has gone into place. So the parents that were there had kids who ranged in age from 8 to 18, from kids who were severely autistic to very high functioning, and who had varying degrees of issues they were dealing with. Some of them, I think about 3 of the parents had situations where they had to call the police because the behaviors were so bad with their kids. One of the moms said that her son broke her nose. Another parent said that because of the child's difficult behaviors, it's very hard for the family to go anywhere together, to go camping, to go different events that the family like to do. And another parent didn't have behavioral problems with her child, but she said, I want my child to enjoy the world more, get out more, do things, and experience into progress. And we made it very clear that we just can't keep waiting until everyone gets up to speed with this. It's not really fair to the families. So we suggested, why not allow a pass-through of the funds to the designated agencies to go directly to those private providers who are willing, able, and qualified to provide services. That was our suggestion. And about a month later, we got a notice that that was approved. So at this point, and I think that was back from middle of November, I will put that memo up on my website. I haven't done it. And basically what that means is if, regardless of where you live in the state, if you have a private provider that could provide the ABA for your child, and they're willing to do that, you could approach your designated agency and talk to them about it, and the funds, the 3.2 million or whatever that goes to the different agencies can go through the agency and they can pay the private provider. So you shouldn't have to wait. And incidentally, if you've already tried that and you've been told that no, they can't do it, they are not under any obligation to do that. The obligation to provide the ABA lies with the state and not with the designated agencies. But if there are hiccups in the situation, it's important to let me know about it, because we can go back and talk about this again. And if money is going to the agencies and they're not letting families use it to provide a very important service, then something different has to happen. Okay, the other way to remedy this is the situation is for the licensure, to create a licensure of the BCBAs, and that is something that is being pursued right now at the legislative level. That could take some time. It might get approved this year, it might not, and it might take a while to get implemented. And the other recommendation actually made when we met with the state was that we asked if a new Medicaid plan could be sent to the feds for approval, one that does not require licensure. California right now is pursuing their state, they just submitted a state plan amendment that allows payment of private providers without licensure. And I have a lot of faith in California. I was raised there, and in law school I always remember California and New York being trendsetters for laws, and I'm optimistic that if California feels they can get this approved, that Vermont could as well, and that would allow us to move move forward a lot more quickly. So the other big issue with Medicaid is the copay issue, and this comes into play when you do have someone who has a child with private insurance and Medicaid is a secondary payer. So ABA can be very expensive due to the intensity, and if they do have the insurance company requires a $20 copay, and they can't charge you more of a copay than they do for other therapies or doctor visits, then $20 5 days a week, that adds up to $5,000 a year. That's a lot of money for a lot of people to pay out of pocket. So typically Medicaid would pay that copay. But it's very tricky right now because of the whole licensure, and they're not allowed to pay the private providers directly. If this is an issue you're facing, I have in mind a few different workarounds, and I'm sure workarounds could be found, because there is definitely an incentive for our state for people to not drop private insurance for their kids and go fully on Medicaid. It'd be much better to just pay the $5,000 than to pay the $60,000 that otherwise the state would have to pay. So if this is an issue you're having, please send me an email. We could have another group go and meet with the state and try to do some more problem solving around this. How are we doing time-wise? Oh, okay. Okay, so let me use up our last few minutes about just getting started with the whole process, and then I'll see if we have some questions. So go ahead and send in some questions if you have. I know this is probably a lot of information I'm throwing at you, but so how to get started. Most important is, and lawyers will always tell you, is to make sure you have really good documentation. My special education parent tip number one is, if it's not written, it never happened. So make sure to first find out how you're going to organize what you're going to be doing, because in the event you need to step it up a level, you'll need this information. And so whatever you need to do, you can send an email to yourself, you could get a notebook, online document, whatever. Just write down who you talk to, how much time you spend. And this was important because when we go and talk to legislators or we talk to the state, we'll say, you know, I called 20 times. I remember I tried to get reimbursed a year and a half ago for speech therapy. It took, and part of it was I wasn't on top of it every day, but it took about 6 months to chase down $1,000. And I don't know if that was the best use of my time, but I must have made, I don't know how many phone calls, how many people, but guess what? I documented all of it, and I just couldn't wait to tell legislators about how difficult insurance companies can make it for us because of this. So document everything you do, very important. So eligibility for this, the therapy under Act 158 is a diagnosis of autism or another early childhood disability up to the age of 21. There needs to be medical necessity, and that's determined by a doctor or psychologist. So there needs to be some condition that could be treated. And there needs to be someone to pay for this, and that would be, as I mentioned, private health insurance or Medicaid. And Medicaid, of course, could be through any gateway, Dr. Dinosaur, Katie Beckett, SSI. And I did talk a little bit about self-insured. This doesn't apply to self-insured unless they voluntarily decide to provide this service. So if you look at this, it should look awfully familiar to you what eligibility is. It really is the same as for any medical condition, right? You you have some symptoms, something that you want to treat, you go and you visit a doctor, or in this case a licensed psychologist. They prescribe a treatment, and then someone pays for it. It's all about medical need. So then your first step would be to go and schedule. Actually, your first step is not get a prescription, is to call and make an appointment with your doctor, your child's doctor, licensed psychologist. So at that visit, you would be talking about your child's, your concerns about your child, and if you have in mind what particular therapies you're looking for. So for example, speech, OT, PT, ABA, you talk to the doctor about it and make sure that it's very clear that if your doctor does write a prescription, that it does indicate it's for home and in the community, not for school hours. So home and the community, very important to be part of that. So if you don't know what your child needs, do your research. But the doctor could also order evaluations to determine needs. So if you're trying to debate whether you want speech therapy, you have a child who's struggling with socialization and social communication, and you're trying to decide, do you want a speech therapist to work with your child, maybe some ABA to also deal with different issues. The doctor can order an evaluation, and you can have both those professionals at different times come and do an evaluation. They can absolutely tell you what should be worked on, how they could work on it. Then you decide as a parent which therapy you'd want to do. Maybe you can do both. We did have some amazing speech therapy for my daughter, but there just weren't enough hours in the day to do both the ABA and the therapy and the speech therapy, so we went with the ABA. So you don't have to have all the answers. I do recommend that for ABA in particular, that you do research and you provide that to the doctor, because often they don't know a whole lot about it. I had one parent tell me last year that she had gone to she went to one of my workshops, and she had gone to the doctor, and she said she had to debate the doctor for a very long time to write a prescription for the ABA, and the doctor finally did it and said, wrote a prescription for, it was something ridiculous, like 5 hours a week for 15 weeks, and that's it. It was something they obviously didn't know very much about, but no one knows everything, so it's important to provide information. My daughter's pediatrician had been hearing from me for years, and I bet by the time the law passed, he couldn't wait to write the prescription, so we wouldn't have to listen to me talk about it anymore. So that's it. We got a prescription and went from there. So the next thing you'll want to do, and just a reminder, if you do send me questions, very short question, I can't read paragraphs. If you want to resubmit one quick question, you could do that. You can send lots of different questions, but just not a long one, because that takes up a lot of airtime. Okay. Thank you. So then you want to get a list of providers. So if you have insurance, you would call insurance company and ask for the in-network providers. Of course, that would be, you'd be asking for an occupational therapist in your area, or speech therapist. For ABA, it would be the board-certified behavior analyst. If your child does not have private insurance, or has, for example, self-insured that does not offer, oh, they're doing some construction upstairs, sorry about that, and your child does have Medicaid, then you call Green Mountain Care. So for Medicaid, I hope this number is still good, I think it is, but it's Green Mountain Care Services. And for private insurance, just look at your insurance card. Now, again, on the self-insured folks, you might work for a company that is self-insured, and that might not be very evident on your insurance card, because the insurance company might manage the program. So you might want to call Human Resources if you work for a bigger company, just to check if it's self-insured or not, just to save you some time in the whole process. So you can also do your own research for who the providers are, and here's the website, and you can find your way around. There's a spot where you can put in Vermont, and the list of the BCBAs will pop in. And last I looked at it, I think about 50 maybe in the state, which is actually pretty good for a state our size, but we hope to have more. And I know there'll be some more people in the state that will be testing in this year too, so we'll have access to more people. I actually have a lot more on this, but I don't have a whole lot of time, so I shorten that, but I will get to more how, another slide I think on how we can get more information to you. So just a reminder about documenting conversations with insurance companies, with Medicaid, information you're told, who told you, because there's a lot of misinformation that's floating around and you want to document that. And again, just to be really careful about sharing information about other services that you might be receiving. So if you are really interested in more advocacy, or if you're having some issues, I'd really love if you send me an FYI of what the situation is. Because when I have a group of parents that have firsthand experience with some of the struggles that they're having, it's very helpful to go talk to the decision makers about it, whether it's someone at the state or the legislators. They want to help and they want to see this successful. This is a really good law we have in place, and people in those positions might not know what issues that the families are facing. So please don't just keep it to yourself or talk to someone else about it. I'd like to know about what's going on. You can just send me, like I said, put an FYI in the subject line, and to me that says this is a non-billable information that I'll get to when I can, and you know, I'll respond to you with thanks for letting me know. If you're looking for more help, we can talk about that as well. But and just some other ways to get more information about this law is you can visit my website. I have a few blogs on the process and what to do. I also have a quarterly newsletter that I send out twice a year. I still call it a quarterly newsletter, but so there's a sign up for it on my website. I do have a Facebook page. It's called Special Needs Law. I do some quick updates on that. You can also join our AWARE discussion board, and there's the link for you. Write it down if you're interested before we switch slides. And you can also access that from aware.org. That's AAWARE, and that's an autism support group. I started with a friend, oh gosh, 2005. We have a brand new discussion board, and there's some sections that are dedicated to Act 158. It's a brand new discussion. We moved to a different site. Not a whole lot of information, but if you want more information, that's a very good place to go. And there are two discussion boards, really. There's one that's general information about the law. Excuse me. And if you really are, if this is something that really interests you, I started with some of those parents that I had gone to meet to the state to talk about our concerns. We have a Trailblazer advocacy group, and those are the parents that are really, really pushing to get services for their kids. This is dedicated to Medicaid in particular, because we still have some issues to deal with on the Medicaid side. If this is something you're really interested in joining, I encourage you to let me know. I need a few more parents from different counties. And the idea behind it is that we have a private discussion board. You share your information there with the other parents, and we exchange information on what people have been doing and what's working and what the obstacles are and how we're working around and things like that. So you have to be okay sharing that information. I also do a workshop. I call it the Nuts and Bolts Workshop about accessing treatment at home. And you can contact my office for more information. You can also ask your school to sponsor the workshop. As I mentioned, this law I think is very helpful for schools. It puts a little bit of less pressure on them, and it gives a lot of information to parents on how else they can access therapy. And of course, you can visit my website for workshop information. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there's one more thing. Oh, on this page is I will be on Thursday evening, that's tomorrow night, at 5 o'clock in Barrie. You can get the information on the WARE discussion board. We have monthly support group meetings, and I usually go and facilitate them, and I will be at the meeting tomorrow. If you want to pop in and have some other questions, we often talk about the law and in different topics. So, and it's a support group, so it's for networking and other parents to discuss and share information. So if you'd like to do that, you can do that and can meet you there. So if you do need some more hands-on help and one-on-one, you can call my office and schedule a time to meet with me. My website, specialneedslawattorney.com. I'm on Facebook and Twitter, not very much on Twitter. Special Needs Law on both. And let me see if I have some quick questions I can answer. Questions about OT, I think I addressed that. It's the same process. You go to the doctor, talk to the doctor, get a prescription for OT, or request the doctor can order an evaluation to see if OT is needed, which insurance company would probably want. And I'm anticipating Medicaid would want as well. They'd want a professional opinion about whether OT is really needed and useful and for your particular child, and how many hours a week or what that might look like. And then you would call either the insurance company or Medicaid for a list of providers on that. So that's the process for that. Let me see, I'm just sorry, I'm just reading the questions really quick. Self-insured, I addressed that. I have a very long question. Okay, question about ABA program at preschool. No, so remember there's school and there's home community. And it's a little bit confusing because for young kids they receive the treatment at home. So for example, if you get your treatment through school or preschool, you can also pursue under Act 158. So they're very separate, and you can absolutely do both. So as I mentioned, my daughter has ABA through the school, but the focus is very different, and then she also has it at home. So I have, I think, one quick minute. I just wanted to mention that I would strongly encourage parents to move forward with this. It can be very helpful, and I think the goal for all of us as parents, I know we have professionals listening as well, but I'm at the Vermont Family Network, so I'm gearing this towards parents, is to move forward with this as quickly as you can if it's something you're interested in. There is a process involved. It's not easy, but it's available, it's there, and once your child is an adult, there's not a whole lot there as far as treatment available. So you want to jump in on this as quickly as you can and move forward with it. And I think we all have the same goals. I have two children. I have a younger daughter, and my hope for her is that she become as independent as possible and happy, productive adult. And I have the same general goals for my daughter with autism, to be more than just happy, but to be as independent and have a life where she can make some choices in the future. So we do encourage you to move forward. We're very fortunate. We've got very supportive legislators and administration. But at the end of the day, as you all know as parents, we have to put a lot of work into this. It's just how it is for us. Okay, so if you have any other quick questions, you can give me a call. I prefer a quick phone call just for quick questions. If you need something a little bit more involved, we can schedule a time to talk. Okay, so thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Please visit VFN's website at vermontfamilynetwork.org for helpful resources and upcoming events. Visit our YouTube channel to view any of our more than 50 archived webinars. If you would like to talk with someone at Vermont Family Network, please call 800-800-4005. Have a good day, and thank you very much.